You know what everyone loves in video games? Generic assassin type factions. Because chances are when you boot up a game for the first time and you get to pick between a faction or a set of characters on screen, you're gonna go with the cool, blacked out, futuristic assassin type faction and character. Or you're gonna go for the old fashioned Japanese styled assassin character and faction. Because let's face it, the all black wearing mysterious character and faction are always the ones that interest us the most as people, to be honest, when we first boot up a game. But why? I'm not actually sure. I suppose it's the same reason why people like Special Forces and other things like Batman. It's got to be something to do with blacked out, highly trained soldiers and people who are all about action and not all about talk. But anyway, I digress. Today we are talking about another Fallout 4 faction and another look into Nuka-World's 3 factions. This time we're taking a look into a stealth-themed, highly lethal Special Forces type faction, the Operators. Hence why I've started off by talking about generic assassin factions. Because the Operators embody that type of faction. So, without further ado, let's get into this. Before I continue with this video, I would ask that you all like and subscribe. I want to thank you all for the support on the last video. It truly does mean a lot to me, and your support is very much valued on the channel. Please do consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the bell to keep notifications on when the channel posts videos and content. Thank you guys ever so much for watching, and enjoy the video. Without further ado, let's get straight into this. The Operators are a stealth-based faction, highly trained group of raiders whose core goal is to take money into Nuka-World and to gain money from the world. They do this by robbing and kidnapping settlers from the Commonwealth. They are able to do this very often, all thanks to their incredible stealth skills and of course their incredible tactics and training, which is the core front of their personalities, which allows them to be deadly in battle too. Now that you know a little bit about who the Operators are as a faction, let's get into overall what their equipment and numbers are like. The Operators are a highly lethal faction, therefore they use a lot of great weapons. To start off, the Operators' main weapon is similarly to all the other faction in Fallout 4's Nuka-World DLC, the handmade rifle, which does around 32 damage and costs around 136 bottle caps. It's important to note, however, that the PAX handmade rifles had very little attachments and clearly preferred to customize their guns to look more cosmetic than actually be more effective in combat. The Operators, on the other hand, are the complete opposite. Normally their handmade rifles are always upgraded to have at least a scope or at the very least an extended magazine or clip, showing just how much they value having good equipment and having rather better equipment than their enemies, making them formidable in battle and allowing themselves to take as little casualties as possible. Now, even though the handmade rifle is their most used gun, much like it's every faction in Nuka-World's most used gun, their second most used gun is very close to the handmade rifle in terms of their usage. The second most used gun is the combat rifle, a gun we see a lot of in the base Fallout 4 Commonwealth world. The combat rifle does around 33 damage, being pretty much equal with the handmade rifle. It's worth 117 caps, making it quite expensive, even though they are very easy guns to find and come across both the Commonwealth and of course Nuka-World. So this must mean they're manufactured and made a lot, or that maybe there's a lot of them left over from before the bombs dropped. But you'd like to think that guns are still being made even though it's the apocalypse, because otherwise it really wouldn't make sense how many of these guns you find. The gun, much like the handmade rifle, is normally always upgraded in multiple different ways for the Operators, so that they can be more effective in battles. Outside of the main weapons, the Operators have been seen to be using many different silenced weapons, such as a silenced pistol, which very well could be their sidearm, and also are known to use knives, as there are many knives lying around their main base which the player can find. The Operators' armor seems to be also very strong, with most of their body being completely covered up in strong light-plated armor, making them harder to be taken down than other factions in Nuka-World and other factions in general. It's important to note that their armor is black, so that if they're doing any operations at night, fight, they also have an element of stealth and camouflage that other factions don't have. Although they don't seem to wear helmets or hats, they do seem to wear some sort of glasses or goggles. This may be to cover their eyes from perhaps shrapnel or the glare of guns when they fire or spark. I'm not quite sure, but it's good to see they value armor. The operators are also confirmed to have at least one set of power armor that we know of. We know the operators have around 50 men in terms of numbers, as each core Nuka-World faction has around 50 men in each one, so it's safe to infer that the operators also have 50 men, similarly to the Pack and Disciples. This means that they have around 70 weapons and of course one set of power armor. They don't have any mini nukes or missile launchers as far as I could see or find out, which is very interesting considering they're the more highly lethal faction that value weapons, attachments, ammo, different types of ways to keep their men alive using armor. You would think they'd also want mini nukes and rockets, but they don't seem to have any, which I could then infer means they probably have slightly less weapons than the Pack does. The weapons they do have seem to be highly modified and customized to be highly effective in battle and to ensure that the operators take as least amount of casualties as they can with their highly effective weapons and their strong armor. So without further ado, these are the final statistics for the operators' equipment and their numbers. Now first things first, we need to talk about the operator's base. The operator's base is located within Nuka-World's main plaza. The operator's base is probably the most small out of all the factions actually located in Nuka-World's main plaza itself, as they take up residence inside the parlor section of the main park. This means unlike the Pack, they get zero outside space. This is a huge problem. Their base cannot be held from the outside. They have no open areas or high advantage points to hold from because they have no outdoors section, and instead the base must be held if an attack is coming from the inside where all their main troops take up residence. This is because instead of having a large chunk of land like the Pack do, they actually only have a building, meaning they can't place troops outside as that part of the park isn't technically their land, and even if they did, it would make for a terrible holding point as that part can be attacked from multiple different angles, and unlike the Pack's part, which is nicely sectioned off so that even the outdoors section still only has one gate to open and enter through, the operator's outdoors section could be attacked from multiple angles, pretty much slaughtering anyone who decides to hold from the outside, which means that the operators are refined to the inside. Now, this is both a good and a bad thing, as they can hold the only entrance very easily. Using their strong weapons, they can set up a defensive perimeter all over the inside of the base and of the parlor. However, if any forces make it inside the parlor, I think it would be a slaughter and not in a good way for the operators. The operators use mostly mid-range weapons and rely on stealth and the element of surprise to win their battles. This means most factions, once gaining entry of the parlor, could walk straight through the operators with little to no difficulty, as the operators, one, don't have the firepower to take down a whole other faction from the inside of a base / small building. This would basically make them sitting ducks to any faction with close range weapons like shotguns or even power armor, or factions that simply outnumber them, as even though the operators are highly trained, there is almost no way they would be able to withstand an outnumbered, outgunned fight with a faction like the Minutemen or even a faction like the Institute. Two, with no way to flank their enemies or attack them from the shadows, they're now literal sitting ducks and can't use their trump card to help them. Now fortunately, it's not all bad news. If we are assuming all the raiders are united, then once again, just like the Pack, it would be very easy for the operators to set up and hold points and checkpoints just outside of the park or even on the door into the park. The raiders could hold the park from the front door, which would be very easy to do so, and make for a strong choke point against enemies, where other factions would really struggle to get through with the operators' tactics and strong weapons. Not to mention the operators may hold more land inside Nuka-World or across Nuka-World, giving them even more of an edge than they already did, as the attacking factions would have to mobilize different different divisions of troops to attack different bases all around the main part, which could be held just as strong as the main part, making it harder to take on the operators and the other raiders as a whole. Even if the operators were divided from the other raiders and weren't working with them, I think by spreading their troops out, or even just mobilizing and holding the front door of Nuka-World, they could put up a seriously strong fight. They'd have a lot of room to maneuver and move around to outflank and take down their enemies in whatever ways they want to. So overall, I'm going to be giving the operator's base a 50% effectiveness on the scale of effectiveness for bases. Now let's talk about what is arguably the most important thing for a faction to have, and that's good tactics. Out of all the factions at Nuka-World, the operators are the ones who use tactics the most and think the most about planning their attacks before they actually do them and carry them out. We can see evidence of this through a terminal you can read in the back of the operator's base, which lists how they successfully abducted people from the Commonwealth and then used a serum that basically made mind control to get these people to do whatever they want in this kind of fucked up experiment. It's really weird and messed up. Yeah, it's messed up. One of the terminals goes over how they took mind-controlled settlers to Diamond City and then got them to do whatever they wanted to whilst they were under mind control in a public area. It was kind of a weird experiment they were doing. From a distance, they would watch, ready to take down the settlers if the mind control didn't work and they tried to run. This in of itself shows just how much the operators value stealth, as they snuck into Diamond City and then blended in with the crowd waiting to take a shot, presumably also having an escape plan to get the hell out of there if they needed to too. And that is how they win their battles and operations. Huh? Operators? Operations? You like what I did there? No? Okay.
He said it! He said it!
Anyway, they use stealth and long-range combat to their advantage, often attacking their enemies from the shadows and from multiple different angles, flanking their enemies from different sides. On the attack, the operators can be highly effective when catching an enemy off guard. They could do some serious damage to even the most strong factions, and even if they were outnumbered, with the element of surprise behind their back, they do real damage and could kill a lot of people. They may well be able to win, which should be an unwinnable battle from their enemies, even if they're outnumbered, using their element of surprise and using the darkness of the night to their advantage to blend in, which is something they do all the time, attacking at night, choosing to have that advantage of camouflage, making their stealth attacks even more deadly and their flanking even more unpredictable. Now, of course, this would not always work. If they're fighting a faction that is vastly outnumbered then I still think they would lose, but ultimately they would still do a lot of damage to their enemies. And if they're fighting a very smart militaristic factions such as the Brotherhood of Steel or Gunners, then their flanking tactics and their night tactics and their long-range tactics still might not be enough, as these factions might adapt very quickly and try to form a new plan to counterattack, which ultimately the operators might not be prepared for and may just lose. Not to mention, they would be much worse attacking during the day or in a normal attack where they don't have the element of surprise. But even that being said, I still think they could do some really damning damage and strong damage against most enemies. Now, how are the operators when it comes to the defensive side? Well, they are not as good as they are on the attack, of course, because they can't use their flanking tactics and their darkness tactics to their advantage, but they still are very deadly and strong. The operators use long-range to mid-range based guns like rifles and snipers, and then the occasional silenced pistol. This makes them highly lethal when you put them in a high up position or on top of a building or an vantage point, and they will do damage. Like I said, highly lethal. They'll take down enemies from a distance before they even get close to their base or the place they're defending. We see evidence of this in the quest where you actually have to take them down if you choose to kill them in the end. They're highly dangerous and very hard to take down. Not to mention, because of their strong armor, they are also harder to take down than every other faction in Nuka-World and can be very draining for other factions to fight. Even though other factions may outnumber them, one operator may be worth 3 Minutemen because of their strong armor, smart and very tactical thinking. Not to mention, you would have to get through both the operators' leaders, who are up for a fight and are very strong to take down, and not to mention are geniuses when it comes to tactics. They're not as good at defense as they are attack, but they're still strong. If they're outnumbered and outgunned or flanked from multiple sides or placed into a room like their own base, then they will be slaughtered. However, they're still strong in the defense when given the proper place to defend. So overall, I'm going to give the operators a 75% effectiveness on the scale of effectiveness when it comes to tactics. Now it's time to take a look at the operator's biggest and best feat, which, just like the pack, is actually very hard to do, as they really don't have one on the same level or scale as many other factions that we've looked at so far in this series. Well, except of course the pack. But that being said, I do think I can find one, and I think, to be honest, I have found one which fits them quite well. I would say their biggest feat, once again outside of staying together as a raider group and taking over a significant amount of land within Nuka-World, which I would say is a pretty big feat in of itself. But I would say their biggest feat is the abduction of the settlers and the experimentation on them. Now, I say this is their biggest feat as they managed to somehow take a settler from the wasteland, so kidnap a settler from the wasteland who would have been in quite a significantly large settlement, which either means they would have had to fight and win a battle to get that settler, or kidnap him using stealth, which is more likely for the operators. Then they'd have to take him from the Commonwealth all the way to Nuka-World, keeping him alive, and then perform mind control on him with an experimental drug, all without the other raider factions finding out. So they did this all without any other raider factions finding out, which is extremely impressive to me. Not to mention, they then also would sneak into Diamond City, one of the most patrolled and security-ridden cities in the wasteland, and stand on watch to shoot the settler if he tried to run and didn't follow the mind control orders. This would all take a meticulous amount of planning to make sure it all goes well, and this just shows how good they are at stealth and how they outclass every other raider faction when it comes down to their tactics and their planning. Their planning is done so well for their operations that they conduct. This, in my opinion, is not the best feat we've seen on the scale of feats from other factions, by no means, especially when you're comparing it to factions like the Brotherhood of Steel or Institute, but I still think it does just show how good the operators are at stealth and using the darkness in their missions to their advantage and to complete their missions. And of course, not to mention, they hold a large base in Nuka-World, which is a feat within of itself. Both show how strong the operators truly are and how they are great tacticians when compared with other factions. As, to be honest, the operators are clearly smarter than all the other factions in Nuka-World, so all the other raider factions, but yet they manage to still live with them in peace. At least for now, that is. This would show incredible amount of restraint and how they are even in the right minds to hold back against other factions and not go into complete war with the raiders, which I know doesn't sound like much of a feat, but these are all raider factions and the operators are clearly the most intelligent, clearly the most planned out, and clearly the highest skill, but yet they show restraint, showing just how loyal their men are to their leader and loyal to their cause of making caps. They clearly view all the other raider settlements inferior to themselves. I mean, so do the other raider settlements to them, but the operators might actually be right. Like I said before, this is not an incredible feat or the best feat ever when compared with other factions, but it does work well to show just how good the operators are at stealth, how good they are at using the darkness to cover what they do, and how smart they are when it comes to tacticians and planning out their battles. Now let's take a look at the leader of the operators and see if they are a good one or not. The leader of the operators is Mags Black. She is a strong, fearless leader built on making money out of the park. She's a strong leader, and from what I could gather, her men look up to her very highly. She values caps over pretty much everything else. She is a strong leader who plans out all her operations and main missions herself. She can't stand the other factions, and much like pretty much all the other operators, she views herself to be more important than all the other faction leaders in Nuka-World and all the other factions, and can't stand working with any of them, as she truly believes her and her men are far smarter and superior than all the other factions. Her men respect her strength, and no one questions her, probably because of how well her men are trained and looked after, and of course disciplined. They get good food, good armor, and a sheltered home. They follow her every single order due to their discipline. to a T. Not to mention she is very strong in a fight in battle, which will help her case and morale. If you choose to go down the path of taking her down, you're going to have a hard time as she is extremely strong. So it's clear her men respect her for that too. But it's not just her strength in battle and her good leadership that makes her a strong leader. It's her second in command too that makes her unquestioned and unchallenged. You see, Mags Black is the sister of William Black, her brother, who also leads the operators as a second in command. Normally I don't talk about second in commands, but he's nearly on par with her in terms of leadership and where he stands in the food chain of the operators, so we'll talk about it. This makes a faction far stronger and feel more united, as it really does feel like a family of raiders instead of just a bunch of people who work together to kill and make money, even though that is what they do anyway, to be fair. Having this brother-sister dynamic really helps to make the operators more strong, and it means that all the men trust Mags and William more, as they truly feel like a family and united together under one home. It also means that assassination attempts are very low, because the closest person to Mags is her brother, who protects her and looks out for her so she is safe, meaning no one can really get close to Mags without going through William. And we even see that ourselves when we first meet her. William is right there, watching our every move to make sure we don't try anything funny.
Discussing when I walked in.
Well, you, Overboss. You're an unknown quantity, and we're interested in knowing who we're dealing with.
So we'd like if you answered the question.
Yes. What went through you as you crushed the life out of that oaf?
Bored. Kinda like this conversation now that you mention it.
Hey, you don't get to talk to Mags that way.
It's all right, William.
Mags is a strong leader, a leader who looks after her troops, a leader who plans her missions and operations well, and a leader who instills discipline in her men and fights hard in battle. She is everything you could want in a leader. Not to mention, her brother only strengthens her grip on her men and her men's faith in her because of her brother and because of the overall united family feeling her brother brings to the operators, making her and her brother truly strong together. So, overall, I would say this is a very, very, very strong leadership, and I'm going to give the operators' leadership a 90% effectiveness on the overall effectiveness scale for leadership. Now, the last main thing I want to evaluate is the operator's chain of command. The operator's chain of command seems to be, well, at least out of the three raider factions, the most in-depth. It's clear that Mags values her crewmates differently to each other by some kind of rank, and we do know that William is referred to as the second in command, so that would have you believe there is some kind of chain of command outside of Mags herself being at the top and William there being the second in command. But at the same time, there really is no evidence to support a strong chain of command system, and maybe that's because there isn't one, which would make a lot of sense if you really think about it. Now, hold on. The operators, like I said before, are like one large family. Therefore, if they had ranks, then maybe it would cause a lot of division. Not to mention, at their core, these people are all still raiders, so it would make sense that they don't have a rank system like other more traditional factions and more military style factions like the Brotherhood of Steel or Gunners. Instead, all they have and all they need to have is Mags at the top and William under her as the second in command and the brother, two main leaders of the faction. That way the rest of the operators feel like they're a part of one large family. This stops for fighting for the top spots, as Mags is more of a hard mother than a straight leader. This means everyone in the operators wants to do everything they can to contribute to be part of the faction for two main reasons. The first reason being they want to please Mags and William, of course, and show their worth to the overall faction. And then the second is to do with the faction's actual main goal, to get as rich as they can. A bit like the pack, I would not recommend this sort of chain of command whatsoever for any faction outside of the operators. However, it works very well for the operators. The family kind of vibe is one that's very strong, interlocked and interconnected. This sort of family vibe means that it stops infighting, it stops someone wanting to reach to the very top spot, and it stops assassination attempts or the faction falling apart. Remember, these are raiders. They need to be kept together by something. And this overall group, family, brotherhood kind of feel, not to reference the Brotherhood.
Your thoughts?
The Institute wants to clean out...
Your thoughts?
The Institute's willing to trash Bunker Hill to get at a couple of people.
Your thoughts?
There's a story here?
That was all I had.
Sure.
Hey, Sid.
But this overall brotherhood kind of feel of family keeps this faction together, and it keeps them well trained and disciplined, listening to what Mags has to say, and of course William. Outside of the operators, this chain of command would not work, but at least it works for them. The chain of command can be confusing, and of course it does come with its negatives. By not having a chain of command, there can be a lot of issues, but for now, at least, it seems to keep the balance of power in check. The chain of command, like I said, is confusing because there really isn't one, but it works well for the members of the operators and keeps them in line. No one steps out of line thanks to this family kind of vibe, to do everything you can for the faction and for the cause and for your leaders. Overall, I'm going to give this chain of command a 75% effectiveness on the scale of effectiveness for chain of command. Once again, I am at a hard point in the video where I now must compare the operators to the US and one other real-life military force and or faction that is around or has been around. Now, the US is a very easy one when it comes to comparison, as I do think the operators' family vibe around their men do make them have kind of a resemblance with the US. The US's army is like very patriotic, and kind of in a similar way are the operators when it comes to their missions, so I could definitely draw similarities there, even if the US Army aren't quite horrific murderers yet. But if I'm comparing them militaristically, they both kind of operate like special forces groups, just with the exception the US Army would completely obliterate and wipe out the operators with little to no effort. But when it comes to comparing them to another faction from real life or a military force, it's a little bit harder to do so. However, I do think, that being said, I have found a real life equivalent that would fit the operators pretty well. And I would say that equivalent would be the South African elite mercenary group of the 1990s. During the 1990s, there was a mercenary group for hire in South Africa, and they are a lot like the operators. They use strong tactics to take down their enemies by attacking at night and flanking and using stealth to their advantage. And if I'm being honest, the operators kind of remind me of, if anything, a mercenary group, because they use armor, modifications on their guns, and stick together as a large, or well, in this case, kind of small, very loyal group, and a very loyal group to their leader, which is a lot like any mercenary group. So I know it's not the greatest comparison I've ever made, but overall I think it works for the sake of the video, and also to just show that the operators are on another level when it comes to other raider groups. They are just tactically better, and when it comes to their weapons, their customization is tactically better, and they are just more kitted out than other factions, and they have a better understanding of who they are, and they're just more skilled in general. So it's not the greatest comparison I've ever made, but I think it works for the sake of this video. In conclusion, the operators are without a doubt a very strong and capable faction. They work best on the attack, using stealth and the night to cover their tracks, so that they can surprise, attack their enemies, and win their battles ferociously. They work very tactically, and this works incredibly well for them. They may be great on the attack, but they are also nearly just as great on the defense, using their custom weapons to strike down their enemies from a distance. The operators have a weak base that can be exploited very quickly and easily if they are not careful, and with their lack of numbers, they really do face a threat from a large faction, or factions as well, that out-equip them. The operators' leadership works very well to maintain order and discipline through the troops. Even if the chain of command is a bit random and very strange, it also works well for the operators. So, without further ado, here are the final statistics for the operators. Thank you guys for watching the video. I really do appreciate it. I'd also appreciate if you liked and subscribed and hit the bell notification so you can be updated on when the channel posts videos. It would really mean a lot to me, guys, and I really appreciate all of you who have watched till the end. Please do comment down below what you thought of the video, and more importantly, what you think of the operators. You know who's next, guys. It will of course be on the 14th of August, me evaluating the Disciples, and that will be the final Nuka-World faction that I'll be taking a look at. So stay tuned for that, guys. And yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed. I've got a lot of projects I'm working on at the minute. I'm absolutely shattered. And yeah, I really appreciate the support. The channel's growing well. It's not growing as well as I wanted it to. But I don't even know what I'm saying at this point, guys. Anyway, thank you guys ever so much for watching. And I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to start streaming soon. I'm going to start streaming. Yes, streaming. So enjoy this. I'll keep you guys updated. I'm waffling. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next video. Stay safe, guys, and peace.